For nearly 4 years now, Westchester County in New York has been caught up in a lawsuit over housing discrimination. Now, it's a matter many in the county thought would have been over way back in 2009 when the county settled that suit. But the issue, the threats, and the possible penalties to the county that keep going on and on. Let's get a summary of where we were and where we are. Andrew, what do you got?
Well, Rich, by law, communities that receive federal housing money must work to analyze the factors that block fair housing. During much of the 2000s, Westchester County did not, a fact that later became the basis of a lawsuit against the county. Facing potentially more than $500 million in penalties, the county in 2009, under the previous county executive Andy Spano, settled that suit, agreeing to spend just over $50 million to build new affordable housing aimed and marketed towards minority residents and lower income residents, and to work to remove the obstacles to fair housing. Since then, the effort to build new housing units has, by all accounts, gone rather well. The efforts to remove fair housing obstacles, according to the feds, have not. Current County Executive Republican Rob Astorino, who inherited the county's obligation to abide by the settlement when he took office in 2010, has in the 4 years since criticized the deal and HUD almost nonstop. He also vetoed a bill that would have forbade landlords from discriminating against people who use government vouchers for their rent. That veto, along with other actions, last month prompted a Justice Department threat to hold the county executive in contempt, as well as the county, and for HUD to threaten to withhold millions of dollars in community program funding. In response, Astorino recently resubmitted the very same law he had vetoed and has promised to sign it again this time. Then on Friday, HUD rejected the county's most recent attempts to comply with the settlement, setting a June 10th deadline to fix the problems or potentially lose that community funding for good. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. And joining us now, the chairman of the Westchester County Board of Legislators, Democrat Ken Jenkins. Ken voted to approve the HUD settlement back in '09 and is probably as knowledgeable about this issue as anybody in Westchester. And I ought to want to point out to everybody that we offered County Executive Rob Astorino, or surrogate from the office, the opportunity to appear alongside for the debate tonight. They declined the offer, but instead, the county executive, Mr. Astorino, will appear on this program Wednesday evening. Mr. Jenkins, thank you.
Thank you.
I was in this building in 2009. I was sitting in between then County Executive Spano, Rob Astorino, fight about a lot of things, but I thought that issue was asked and answered. What the heck happened from then that we're still talking about this in 2013?
Well, there's a bunch of recalcitrance from the Astorino administration. HUD has been very clear on what we need to do. Right now, there's $17 million of community development block grant funding that is in the balance. That was ported on again on Friday. We have two things we have to do. One is we have to have a zoning analysis and provide HUD with a substantial plan on what we're going to do. We don't have to actually do anything at this point in time, but just have a substantial plan in place, a substantial assurance of a plan for HUD. And the second piece is dealing with source of income legislation.
I want to get to that one in a second, because that's another debatable one. You also got to give it the definition for audience. But the county executive's been on the show, and he said, among other things, what HUD and the feds want to do is social engineering, and the feds are extorting here the county, and it's not fair. Finally, he says, we're not only where we're supposed to be, we're ahead of schedule, so the feds, they're just laying it to us. Is he right on any of those three counts, on the timing, the methodology, and also that there's the Fed is being heavy-handed with the county?
Well, he's right that we're ahead of the unit count as according to the stipulation agreement. We have 750 units to build in 31 communities over a 7-year period, and we're ahead on those benchmarks, and that's something that the administration and the legislative branches and all our municipalities should be proud of. But that's only one part of the equation. The other part of the equation was to have this document called the Analysis of Impediments document to show how we were going to affirmatively further fair housing. And that is where the stumbling blocks have been. And from 2009, we were supposed to turn this document in 2009. It's still 2013 now.
Put it in usable English for audience. There was how many communities, by the way?
31.
31. So in these 31 communities, basically, they had to create low-income housing or affordable housing here. And those communities, a lot of them didn't want it. And the county exec said, I'm not going to make him do anything, even though his predecessor agreed to that and it was signed by the feds.
The municipalities agreed to do that themselves. That was part of the deal for taking the money from the federal government, that they were going to affirmatively further fair housing. And what Westchester got caught with was that we made promises and assertions in our documentation in 2005. that we had not followed through on.
Took the money and didn't live up to
And
the
we didn't
deal.
do that. So that's exactly the issue. So the federal government's not overreaching, it's not making any changes, not doing social engineering. It's what we agreed to, and that's where it really should be.
But in 2011, I've got a letter here on page 7. In 2011, they said the obligation to affirmatively further housing beyond the four corners of the settlement. So there was a settlement in 2009, as you mentioned, with Spano, who, by the way, lost that year for re-election when he happened to sign this thing. I wonder why, if this was an issue or not during that time. I grew up in Westchester, so it was a major issue then. The HUD agreement was one thing, and they want to go far beyond that. 50% of the population needs housing above a certain 3 bedrooms or more, possibly, at this point, but they want to take that number above that for 3-bedroom housing. What about studios? What about 2 bedrooms? What about, my brother and I shared a room growing up in Briarcliff. I mean, to say that everyone's got a right to live anywhere they want at this point in America, right? They can live in any town if there's housing that can be built there and it can be affordable. But at this point, to say it's got to be 3 bedrooms and where it's got to be, I mean, people on Section 8, don't they need public transportation a lot of times, and yet they are not letting this be built near there?
So the first thing is that the letter that you're pointing to is the May 13, 2011 letter, and there was a letter a month afterwards that said there's 2 things that you have to do. So a lot of times with it's being disingenuous when we point to something and then turn around and say, well, we want to do the last possible document. The last possible document said you have to do 2 things to clear up your analysis of impediments: zoning analysis and source of income. That was it. It was a 1-page letter with 2 paragraphs in it, and the administration, the county executive Astorino, insist on going back to that May 13th letter where, hey, you know what, over the period of time since 2010, we in Westchester County asked the federal government to do some things, and they in turn asked us to do some things.
They have asked you to go beyond the agreement, though.
So we asked them to do that too.
The county executive has to agree, has to abide by what agreement was in place, but not go above and beyond, which is what HUD asked. I mean, Chairman, is quarter-acre zoning discriminatory?
Well, it depends on where that is, because if in certain places, if you have quarter-acre zoning and it's single-family units only, then you have no opportunities for multifamily, and you can't have income balance in municipalities.
So what's next? Are we going to say that houses in Westchester can't go above a certain price if they're on quarter acre, and therefore we've got to cap housing costs in New York?
Not at all, not at all. I mean, what happens is when you look at zoning analysis, and that's what's being done, frankly, right now with the monitor, the court-appointed monitor is going through all of the federal, all of Westchester County's zoning analysis and determining whether or not there's discriminatory type zoning, and what are we going to do about that. We had some zoning in one of the Rye areas in Rye Brook, where we are building some housing. And what they had to do was say, hey, wait a second, you can't just have housing for public service workers, teachers, and firefighters. Guess what? That's discriminatory, right? And you have to have that federal housing available for everyone. And now you have to market that to everyone. Doesn't mean everyone's going to live there.
But Mark, I want to get into the source of income legislation, because that's coming for a vote next week.
First, explain to the audience what it is.
That basically, it means that you can't be discriminated against if you use public assistance Section 8 as to pay your rent, correct? The bill that's being voted on next week, which was submitted by the county executive, is that at all different from the version that he vetoed a few years ago?
Nope, it was the same exact legislation that he vetoed in 2010. That was what the Justice Department ordered, that he submit that legislation and work with the legislators to promote that source of income legislation. And the court cases that Westchester has lost in this case, it said that the county executive failed to do his duty as far as the stipulation agreement, as far as promoting source of income, and said that he would be eligible after the county was held in contempt. Then after our fines were exhausted and we would go bankrupt, then the county executive would have personal fines and jail time, as what happened in the city of
Let me
Yonkers.
again try to translate for the audience who hasn't followed this at home.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
In effect, what the county executive vetoed before, he said is okay now.
That's
Are you
exactly
saying that the county exec capitulated?
No, what I'm saying, the county executive is following the stipulation agreement,
Okay.
which requires that. So if people want to say it's capitulation, that's one thing. It was bipartisan legislation that was enacted. It was Republicans and Democrats that were working together, because it's about preventing discrimination based on your source of income, wherever it happens to come from. You had some protected classes that we were extending. It's a discrimination, and we should
Has the
stop it.
county, whether it be in legal fees or an opportunity cost, Has the county lost any money, and what is the possible exposure still for the county as we sit here tonight?
It's $500 million worth of exposure for Westchester County. Right?
Potentially.
Right now, if the stipulation agreement is vacated, and that is what is on the table right now, is that we can have our stipulation agreement vacated, $500 million worth of fines to Westchester County, plus the loss of additional federal funding. Right now, it's $17 million that's going to the local municipalities, and in many cases have already laid that money. They have already put it out. The projects are done and completed, and municipalities who are hurting right now are waiting for that money to come back.
The county
And we-
executive asked the governor to step in and let the money go from HUD to the state to go to the municipalities. So therefore, that would save that money and make sure municipalities who need it get that money. Isn't that correct?
Well, actually, Congresswoman Lowy and Congressman Engel and some other Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer asked for that a year and a half ago because those municipalities, as well as the not-for-profits, were not getting that money. Instead of Westchester taking over that money and to be able to manage that money. We had that with Hurricane Sandy dollars where they skipped over Westchester County and almost didn't provide those monies to the municipalities because of Westchester.
But there's a solution to get those monies to the municipalities, though. That's not a liability when they get that money.
What used to happen was that we used to advance the money and get the money back from the federal government because we know where the federal government lives and get that back.
But isn't
We
there a
can do
more
that now.
basic thing out of this, which is, even for people who don't follow this, a deal's a deal. But no, time out. When you're a little kid, you make a deal, either you shake on it, or in this particular case, his predecessor, he doesn't have to like it.
That's correct.
But there was a deal. You can't always say, I renege.
But no, HUD in 2011.
And you're going to win a fight with the feds.
But here's the challenge, though. As a leader, do you fight for the people that elected you to represent, or do you roll over and let HUD do things? One of the things the chairman mentioned was marketing. They believe, HUD believes.
Right.
HUD,
There was
HUD
a signed
believes-
agreement.
But Richard, it's a signed agreement he agreed to, but in 2011, and the chairman says there's other letters since then, but in 2011, the HUD's put Rob Astorino on notice to say, we're going beyond the agreement. And Rob
I'll let
said,
you have final
you
word
can't
on
do
this.
that.
Well, the truth again is that one is not going above the four corners of the agreement. They're trying to stay within it. A federal court of appeals judges, a set of judges said, you all are in violation of this, move forward and get this done. And where we are right now is that we have 17 legislators that are not going to let Westchester County go down that path, no matter what recalcitrance the county executive may have. And we have to stop, some of the angry rhetoric that just scares people and just focus on resolving the
Aren't
issue.
there minorities in Westchester that need this housing, and yet the HUD recommendation is you advertise outside of Westchester? Shouldn't we take care of the men and women that live and work in Westchester and have provided for this community for decades?
It's federal dollars. So that means the federal government, the entire United States would be eligible for these dollars. And quite frankly, again, everyone in Westchester, not just minorities, all folks that are in the protected class would be eligible for this, whether they're seniors.
So
whether
you're
they're people in
saying you're
community.
saying that the people who live in Westchester don't deserve the preferential treatment then? You're saying because you're letting HUD dictate what happens in this community.
We took the money from that, right?
It's not up to the county legislature. It's not up to the county executive. You signed a deal You signed a deal with the federal government. You didn't live up to your end of the bargain. The then county executive, before Astorino even stepped foot into White Plains, they didn't live up to their end of the bargain.
And
It's a deal.
the county executive signed this, lost this, and the current county executive is fighting.
It doesn't matter.
Are fighting for the men and women that elected him.
Sounds good, but it's a deal.
But it's the truth. In 2000, the 2009 deal is not what HUD is sticking to.
If you're fighting for the Westchester residents, how about the taxpayers have to foot the bill?
That's right.
But
and at this time,
How much
how does
legal
Westchester
fees? We're over
do
$1
that?
million into this, and what do we have
And
to show
what
for
about
it?
Well over
housing values across Westchester when there's HUD saying zoning across Westchester doesn't work anymore?
All
I
those
grew
things-
up on a third of an acre.
All those things are not true as far as housing prices are concerned. All that fear factor, saying that there's going to be projects in the middle of Chappaqua, all that sounds good in a soundbite, but it's not getting the job done. And that's exactly where the problem is right now. The federal government has been working with this administration. They took pains to show how much they've been working with
I'm
them.
not talking
and we just need to get
soundbite.
it done.
I'm talking Forbes, Wall Street Journal, and other publications have said the same thing I'm saying. That's not a soundbite. These are well-written articles that agree with what I've been saying and disagree with a lot of what's going on here.
You got the last word. Good for you. All right, Mr. Jenkins, thank you very much for joining this clown here tonight. We want to remind everybody again, the housing settlement and all these questions, we're going to bring them up again here. We're one-on-one conversation with the county executive, the aforementioned Rob Astorino. He'll be here Wednesday night at 6 o'clock on RFL. We jump to a break. But when we come back, we turn to the lovely world of Albany. Nobody arrested today yet. We're going to tell what's gone on there and also talk about some other political issues facing New York. Stay with us.